Today, we're going to talk about brain fog. Brain fog, it's a term that's not recognized in conventional medicine. There's no ICD-10 code around it, very hard to define, and therefore it's not really treated. It's hard to explain, it's hard to put in words, yet you absolutely know when you have it. Millions of people can absolutely tell you if they have brain fog. They could tell the difference between the time when they didn't have brain fog and when they have it. And they can tell you when there's moments when it lifts. They actually use that word. They feel like it lifts. And they can tell you when they have bad days. They could feel it. They could say it. They know what's happening. So we have this thing that affects so many people, millions of people. Yet conventional medicine doesn't really know what to do with it, doesn't know how to deal with it. So, for those of you suffering from brain fog, it's time for some validation. You know, I'm big on that. And today we're going to explain what brain fog is and what we can do about it. Let's go. So, let's talk about brain fog. What is it? It's hazy thought, right? Difficulty with recall. And it's something with a loss of what's called brain endurance. What that means is you can still get your things done, but you might need some more breaks to get it done. So you do what you've always done, but it might take you a little bit longer. This is brain fog. And brain fog is not just a concept, it actually means that you have neuroinflammation, inflammation here in the brain. Your brain has nerves and they're irritated. Now, of course, there's a spectrum of neuroinflammation from mild to severe. And when we're talking about brain fog, we're actually talking about a mild form of neuroinflammation. You can't see it on MRI. There's no test for it, but it's there. And this is very different. I just want to make sure that we're all clear that this is very different from a loss of function. Like if you can't drive anymore or you can't perform certain activities, that's a different kind of inflammation that should be further addressed. And today we're focusing on the mild kind of neuroinflammation that creates brain fog. But side note, inflammation of the brain is the kind of the baseline for all cognitive issues. So if it's ADHD, depression, neurodegenerative diseases like Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, all cognitive disorders have an element of neuroinflammation in it. So these are all diseases of inflammation of the brain, and they're rampant today. They're super popular. So if you're suffering from any of those cognitive issues or know someone, this episode is still very relevant for you, even though we're focusing on brain fog. Brain fog, as I said, is that you can do what you need to do, but it's a little bit harder. So the classic sign is what we call reduced brain endurance. Just a little harder to remember, a little harder to get through your tasks. You know, if you used to be able to sit for an hour and get things done, maybe you need more breaks, can't read the chapter without taking more breaks. That's brain endurance. The other classic sign of brain fog is that there are moments when the fog lifts. That's really important. So some people will be like, you know, after I eat a meal, I feel real brain fog. And it can last for a few hours. And for some people, it can last days and weeks with maybe a good day or two in between. So that ability to get better and worse is also another key concept in brain fog. And as I said, it's really hard to define, impossible to test for. But one of the reasons is because neuroinflammation and brain fog is actually a symptom that something else is going on. It's a symptom of neuroinflammation, and the trick is trying to find the cause of that neuroinflammation. Let's give another example of where you have this in your body all the time that might be easier to relate to. Body aches, joint pain. If any of you out there are suffering from body aches and joint pain, you know by now that it's usually a symptom of something else. The joint pain is happening from inflammation, but what's causing that inflammation? Some people, it's an autoimmune issue. Some people, maybe you just have the flu and you have aches and pains and you just need the flu to go away. Maybe you really overdid it over the past few days and now you have aches and pains and you're recovering. All of them, all these people will have aches and pains and inflammation, but each person will have a different reason for that inflammation. So in order to fix the inflammation of the achy joints, you have to find what's causing the inflammation in the joints. Another symptom that we're all very familiar with that works the same way is coughing. You might have a cough, but what is that cough? Is it asthma? Is it postnasal drip? Is it allergies? Is it a sickness? Once you know what's causing the cough, you can manage the cough. Same goes for brain fog. You have to figure out what's causing the neuroinflammation, and manage that for the brain fog to lift. So when there's inflammation in the joints, you feel pain. When there's inflammation on your skin, you'll see a rash. And when you have neuroinflammation, you will have brain fog. So to understand why this happens, of course, we have to get a little technical. I always get a little technical with my listeners, but my listeners love it. That means you, if you're listening, even if it's your first time and you're still here, you're someone who likes when we get technical. So kudos to you. You're awesome. So we have to talk about microglia. There are nerve cells in your brain, and they're in charge of constantly maintaining your brain. That's their job. They're constantly checking the area for damage and infection and dealing with it. There are several types of microglia, but we're going to focus on two of them called M1 and M2. M1 is inflammatory and neurotoxic, and M2 is anti-inflammatory and neuroprotective. So again, M1 causes damage, M2 calms things down. So things that will trigger M1 are going to trigger inflammation and brain fog. Things that will trigger M2 will calm the brain and help the brain fog lift. Okay, so we're going to follow that. Feeling hungover is a good way to describe brain fog and also to understand this M1, M2 concept. Everybody knows that going out for a night of adult beverages on the next day, you're not going to be as sharp. None of you would choose to partake if you have an important presentation the next day, or you're taking you have an important, interview or a test. You don't think it's actually a good idea to spend the night drinking, because alcohol triggers M1, inflammation, which will leave you not feeling as sharp, right? But eventually you drink water and maybe you take a nap, and that triggers M2 and your brain recovers. Okay? That's pretty much now you know everything you need to know about M1 and M2. And it's clear to everyone listening that alcohol, which is something I put in my mouth that goes in my belly, can affect my brain, right? Super clear. Everybody knows that if you drink alcohol, even though it goes in the belly, it actually affects the brain. But as soon as we suggest that maybe something else that you put in your belly can affect the brain, well, now we're just being alternative and crazy. So if I say, for example, that gluten can affect your brain, that sounds totally insane, right? No. It's only for alcohol. Only if alcohol hits your belly does it affect your brain, but it can't be anything else, right? And hopefully most of you know I'm being super sarcastic. Let me introduce you to something called gluten ataxia. Ataxia is a fancy word that means impaired coordination, kind of like what a drunk person looks like. Coordination is sloppy, it's a little bit off. Alcohol ataxia is obvious. You have a few martinis, and suddenly walking is a little bit harder. Did you know that the same thing can happen for some people with gluten, and it's called gluten ataxia? So that means impaired coordination due to gluten. It's an autoimmune disease that triggers a lack of coordination when someone eats gluten. So it's possible if you have a person in your life that's always clumsy or is a little bit off, is actually just sensitive to gluten. And here's the crazy part. The longer it takes to diagnose that somebody with gluten ataxia, the worse it is, because the entire treatment is just to go gluten-free. But if it took years and decades to discover this, damage has already been done, and gluten-free can't reverse it. Gluten ataxia accounts for 40% of all ataxias categorized as unknown, and 15% of all ataxias. And the clincher is that most people with gluten ataxia don't even have GI issues from gluten. Let me say this whole paragraph again. There are people out there with coordination issues who have these issues because their brain reacts to gluten even though their stomach is fine. Their stomach can handle it, but their brain can't. And I tell my patients this all the time. Just because your stomach can handle something doesn't mean another part of your body is not reacting to it. Okay? It's really important. It's an important concept I want everyone to understand. It doesn't mean it's not affecting your brain or your skin or your joints. Now, I'm not saying that because you have brain fog, you have a sensitivity to gluten, although you probably do. I'm trying to show you yet another way that food affects your brain, and it's not just alcohol. And of course, the list is more than just gluten. So I think you're getting the idea that there are things in your life that are likely causing the brain fog. But another way of seeing it is that there are things you're exposed to that's causing M1 activation and not enough things around you that is causing M2 activation, which calms the brain. And when you start using the technical terms of M1 and M2 instead of just brain fog, it starts to make sense. So let's talk about what activates M1, which we don't want, and what activates M2, which of course we want. And we're going to start with what's on your plate and in your cup. So we already discussed alcohol. Let me put this up here. So we already discussed alcohol. If you're experiencing brain fog, you just have to abstain from alcohol until you're fully recovered because alcohol increases M1 activation and we're trying not to have the M1 activation. So it doesn't make sense that as you're trying to heal your brain that you give it alcohol. It's like picking a wound as you're trying to heal it. Gluten. Even though you might not be an extreme case of gluten ataxia, it's a known neuroirritant. So why even bother with it if you're already dealing with brain fog? Not only does it cause an M1 uptick, inflammatory uptick, but when you eat gluten, it breaks down into something called gluteomorphin, which is an opioid peptide from the gluten. So in the brain, it binds to areas called the opioid receptors, which basically gives a message of start feeling a little bit tired and a little bit loopy. It actually works like a very, very, very low level morphine in your brain. Dairy. Milk products are also inflammatory, cause an uptick in M1, and they also break down into something called casomorphine, which also acts on the opioid receptors in your brain, leading to brain fog. So again, if you're dealing with brain fog, why mess with it? The next thing you have to do is stabilize your blood sugar. And now you might say, well, I don't have diabetes, so my blood sugar is fine. Incorrect. If you have insulin resistance, your sugar is not stable. If you fall apart every time you skip a meal, you get hangry, your sugar is not stable. If you get super hypoglycemic at night because you didn't eat dinner, your sugar is not stable. If you're exhausted after a high carb meal and you need to take a nap, your sugar is not stable. Get your sugar under control. And this applies to you even if you're not diabetic. And we'll talk more about what to eat, but let's talk about other factors that affect that M1 and M2 regulation. Exercise. Exercise calms down neuroinflammation, brings down M1, brings up M2. And not only does it help you while you're exercising, but the effect lasts for hours after. Now, how much to exercise is very individual. You cannot just go around telling people, hey, everyone exercise 1 hour a day. For some people, it might be 10 minutes. You do not want to exercise to the point of falling apart because that's M1 pathway again. You need to find that place where it's just the right amount for you, where you're not falling apart. If it's an hour for you, awesome. If it's 10 minutes for you, great. You'll find out because when you go to 11 minutes, you fall apart. Whatever that number is for you, that is exercise for you. Do not push yourself to the point of exhaustion because that's M1 triggering. We want M2. Stress. And I know that everyone talks about stress, kind of what it does to us psychologically and emotionally, but it actually physically turns on an inflammatory pathway. Stress-induced inflammatory pathways have been shown to be as significant as a traumatic brain injury. They can affect the brain as much as a traumatic brain injury. So if you're like level 4 million stress walking around, taking all the supplements in the world is not going to help you. So you're walking around eating right and you have your bag of supplements, but you're still in this horrible job or in a horrible relationship. It's not going to work. There are times where eating right and getting the supplements is not going to be enough if you're surrounded in a bad environment. So whenever possible, remove yourself from that environment because it is causing your brain fog. It's a part of that M1 pathway. But if you can't remove yourself for some reason, then you need to focus your resources on learning how to manage the stress. Even just taking a deep breath. Just taking a deep breath. Just take one right now. I just took one with you. Just take a deep breath. It already calms you down. I'm already calmer for the next part of this episode. Super excited. It reduces inflammatory cytokines. It's not just psychological. It actually affects your body. Sleep. Sleep activate M2. Sleep disturbances will activate M1, which we don't want. So if we don't sleep or our sleep is disturbed, we activate M1, we cause neuroinflammation, it messes with our learning, it messes with our memory, it increases brain fog. So remember that inflammatory levels go up with chronic sleep deprivation. It's important for everyone, but if you're suffering with brain fog, sleep is where it's at. So again, your nutrition could be on point, your supplements could be on point, but if you're not sleeping, you're not going to get rid of the brain fog. I do need to also mention allergies and sensitivities in some people, like what's called an allergic brain. If you have sensitivity to foods or allergies or mold, your histamine levels go up. That can also cause neuroinflammation. If you ever had hay fever, you know what it feels like. You feel like you're underwater, like you're foggy. But if you can, for some people, it smells. Some people around certain perfumes or air deodorizers or paint, if it triggers you, if it makes you feel unwell in the moment, gives you a headache, just know that it's causing your neuroinflammation. So if you're dealing with brain fog, you're going to want to remove that thing from your environment. Okay, so now we need to talk about, all right, what should we do? What should we do if we have brain fog? I got all the things I shouldn't do, right? What should we do? So, like I said, if you're drinking alcohol, stop. Not forever, just until you're done with this brain fog. You need to sleep 7 to 9 hours. It's non-negotiable for everyone, but especially for you if you're dealing with brain fog. You need to exercise, and what that looks like is very different. Don't look to your left, don't look to your right. Only you know what's right for you. What should you eat? Okay. What should you eat really depends on how much you're willing to do for this brain fog. Some people are so like done with the brain fog that they say to me, I'll eat anything you say. You know, you tell me to eat berries off the tree, I'll eat berries off the tree. And some people say to me, I really can't do the super restrictive thing. So I'll tell you the must-haves, and then I'll tell you the ideal scenario of nutrition that brings down M1 and increases M2, and you see where that fits for you. But before we talk about what we can eat, let's talk a moment about what we need to drink. We need to drink water. Hydration is really, really, really important. Not just when you're thirsty, you need to drink water. Most of us walk around dehydrated. We don't drink enough water. We have sodas and juices and coffees and teas, but we don't have enough water. And this water causes intracellular hydration, meaning it goes into our cells. We need to be hydrated, not just in our kind of bloodstream, but in the cells themselves. It helps give you energy and improves your performance. So with food, we've established clearly by now that food affects the brain. We need anti-inflammatory foods. We need stuff that brings down M1 and upregulates M2. P.S. Some of you might say, hey, when I was on a round of steroids for my URI, or if I used antibiotics for an infection I had, my brain fog lifted. But then as soon as I was off the steroids or the antibiotics, my brain fog came back. So does that mean you need more steroids and antibiotics? Absolutely not. What that means is both of those things caused an anti-inflammatory space. They were anti-inflammatory. Antibiotics are also anti-inflammatory. So in the time that you were on that medicine, the brain fog may have lifted because you were anti-inflammatory. And then as soon as you stopped taking the meds and went back to your regularly scheduled nutrition, the inflammation came back. So we have to really focus on anti-inflammatory eating. At the very, very least, if you cannot restrict, at the very, very least, you need to eliminate gluten and dairy from your life if you have brain fog. It's the most basic. And for some of you, that may be enough. For some of you, just removing these 2 items and you're like, oh my God, I feel better. Amazing. Remember, not only is an M1, M2 issue, but gluten and dairy break down into gluteomorphin and casomorphin, which act on your opioid receptors, which make you feel loopy and tired. So at the very least, get rid of those 2. And again, I'm not saying for the rest of your life, although that would be nice, at least until your brain fog resolves permanently. Now, for those of you with serious brain fog, this may not be enough, and you're going to need to remove more things. For example, high saturated fats like French fries and chicken nuggets. For the people who are just gluten-free, maybe they can get away with eating a gluten-free chicken nugget. Not good for you, but they can get away with it. But for some of you who are really dealing with brain fog, it's not going to be enough. A gluten-free chicken nugget is not going to cut it for that M1 inflammation. So you're going to need to level up a little more. I want you to consider a ketogenic diet. Now, hold on. This is for you, Gina. Just this part was for Gina, not the whole conversation, because she used to be a coach. So when I say ketogenic, I do not mean that you need to go and eat meat all day. No, absolutely not. That's not what keto means. Okay. Somehow it got lost in translation. Ketogenic diet means that you teach your body how to use fat instead of carbs as fuel. And I'm not going to go heavy into it, but it's a diet that's high in fat, not a diet that's high in meat all day. We need good fats, avocado, olive oil, salmon. Our brain needs fat to be on point. And a keto diet has a very low amount of grams of carbs, which teaches your body to burn the fat and turn it into the fuel it needs. The reason it's called ketogenic is because when you burn fat instead of carbs, you produce ketones. And you see that in your urine. And that is what keto means. It does not mean eat animal protein all day. So please put your pound of bacon away, because that's not what I'm talking about. Okay. Remember, we're not doing this to be part of a trend or part of a movement. We're doing this to calm down M1 pathways and increase M2 pathways. A ketogenic diet triggers M2 pathways, which is what we want. So brain fog starts to disappear. What else increases M2 pathway? I'd be happy to tell you. Intermittent fasting. It's been found that the combination of intermittent fasting with keto increases brain volume, gray matter increases, raises BDNF, which is like miracle grow for your brain, and blocks inflammation. And all of it helps switch on the M2 pathway. Okay, so recap. I know I said so much. This is a really important topic. If you have brain fog, get sleeping, get rid of alcohol, exercise, whatever that means for you. It's different for everyone. Try gluten-free and dairy-free at the very least, but even better, a ketogenic diet, and consider intermittent fasting. And I know I told you a lot, and if you need help and want to work with us, all you have to do is find us at The New Method. New is spelled with a K, and we're on every platform except for Twitter, because I talk too much. Send us a message wherever you are. I look forward to working with you and hearing from you, and I look forward for you to become a game changer, because you always knew there was a better way. I'll talk to you guys.